Hi, welcome to the Times of Israel's Daily Briefing. It is Sunday, August 31st, and I'm Jessica Steinberg. I'm speaking today with diplomatic correspondent Lazar Berman. Hey, Lazar, how are you?
Hi, Jessica. Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov to you. It is day 695 of the war. The government cabinet is holding its weekly meeting in a secure location after Israel acknowledged that it assassinated top Houthi officials. Israel's defense chiefs are expected to present a nearly united front to the security cabinet on Sunday as well, aiming for the acceptance of the current hostage proposal on the table, the proposal for a ceasefire and hostage-related deal, rather than going back into Gaza. Meanwhile, the body of slain hostage Idan Shtivi was recovered from Gaza by the IDF and Shin Bet, as well as the body of Ilan Weiss. Idan Shtivi was his body was taken from the Nova Festival on October 7th. Ilan Weiss was taken from Kibbutz Be'eri. We'll talk about those headlines as well as what's happening with Israeli planes in Turkish airspace, Netanyahu's recognition of the Armenian genocide, and Lazar's latest reporting from Gaza. Stay with us. Okay, Lazar, let's start with the latest headline: the cabinet holding its meeting in a secure location. That's on the top of our pages right now. Tell us what you're hearing and, what that really portends.
Yeah, so there's the weekly cabinet meeting that Prime Minister Netanyahu holds with his government ministers. That's usually held in his Jerusalem office. This time, it will be held in a secure location. Now, we can't say exactly where, but there's a secure location underground in Jerusalem. I assume it's there. Of course, this comes after two significant assassination attempts / assassinations. Now, the most significant was last Thursday's strike in Sana'a in the Houthi-controlled part of Yemen, in northwest Yemen, that took out the Houthi government's prime minister and other senior officials. It still remains to be confirmed who exactly was killed in that strike, but we do know that the Houthis have pledged to retaliate. Of course, the Houthis, Iran-backed, have been firing missiles at Israel and at shipping in the Red Sea, basically throughout the war that started on October 7th. So, we usually shoot those down, but they have gotten through a few times, and they have been able to, if you remember, strike a piece of or territory within the Ben Gurion International Airport. And of course, shutting down that shipping has really taken a toll on trade in the world, on Egypt, and has also affected Israel. So it's not a threat to take lightly, but I'm sure this is mostly seen as a precaution. The other strike that we're talking about is Saturday's strike on Abu Obaida, who's the spokesman for Hamas's military wing. Now, there's no official confirmation from Israel that we indeed did target him or did succeed in killing him, but anonymous officials who are talking to Israeli media are saying that they're pretty optimistic. So that's the second one as well. Of course, there's not that many senior Hamas officials left in Gaza. The more junior ones are taking their place because, of course, we know that the organization is still fighting, is still able to operate in some places in a coherent fashion, and, of course, is still holding on to the hostages and is still making demands in terms of their release. So that's where things stand now. We'll see what comes out of that meeting. We'll probably have information in a few hours on what was said within that cabinet meeting.
Okay, let's turn to the security cabinet, to the hostages, to the hostage deal that is on the table, and the tensions there of you have, as you wrote, nearly all of the defense chiefs are saying accept the current proposal for a ceasefire and hostage deal, and instead of going back to fighting in Gaza. Again, what's your take on it? What are you hearing? What do you think we'll be hearing in the next hours?
All right. So this is based on a report from Channel 12 from Friday that in this meeting, most of the top security chiefs, so we're talking about IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir, the Mossad Director David Barnea, and National Security Advisor Tzachi Hanegbi, who's very close to Netanyahu, are expected to all say that to argue for Israel accepting this partial deal that Hamas says that they have accepted last week. Israel, I'll remind listeners, had been pushing for a partial deal throughout the war, but has recently, since Hamas rejected the last partial offer, has now been saying that they'll only accept a full deal that guarantees that Israel's demands are met for ending the war. These defense chiefs, of course, this does not include the Shin Bet leader, are going to say, listen, this is what we wanted throughout. This serves our interest. Let's at least have a security cabinet meeting on it, which we haven't done. And they're going to say this is the best way to bring the hostages back alive and possibly use this ceasefire to negotiate for the other demands being that Hamas disarm, its leaders leave Gaza, and that they in no way rule the Gaza Strip. So that's what they'll be pushing. I don't expect Netanyahu to change his mind. He's been pretty consistent and clear and has been backed by President Trump. The Americans say most recently it was Senator Lindsey Graham who was saying he was sure that Trump will back whatever Israel does. So it's basically Israel's decision here, and it looks like Netanyahu has made his decision.
But Tzachi Hanegbi's inclusion in that group, that was surprising to me. Was that surprising to you?
Yes, because again, he's one of the closest Netanyahu aides. He has been for a while. I believe he's on his way out, though. I think he's going to be replaced at some point. He's going to step down. He's had some health problems as well. But yeah, he's usually not in the same group as the the Mossad chiefs and the IDF commanders. So this is a little bit different because he's grown up as a politician, as a core Likudnik, and has been very close to Netanyahu as well.
Okay. While we're here, let's talk about your trip down to Gaza, your trip. Going in, you covered the 7th Armored Brigade that's been fighting on the outskirts of Gaza City. And you spent, I assume, most of the day with them or part of the day with them?
Yeah, so it was basically the morning. The 7th Armored Brigade is basically seen as the elite active service armored brigade. Of course, during this war, and I think all subsequent wars, when it's an armored brigade, let's say it's a brigade combat team. So it includes other elements. So there was the Rotem battalion from Givati, which is infantry. There was engineering. So it's a mix of capabilities all operating under the 7th Brigade. Now, 7th Brigade is additionally interesting because 6 of the hostages, 2 living and 4 bodies that are being held in Gaza, so of the 48, were from the 7th Brigade. So if you remember those very difficult scenes of Israeli crewmen being pulled out of their tanks by some by Hamas, some by just seems like civilians, those are from the 7th Brigade. So again, there's 2 alive, 4 killed, but that is certainly that is on the minds of the officers that I spoke to. Now, what's also interesting here from a more military perspective is this is the 7th time the IDF has been operating in Zaytun, in that neighborhood on the edge of Gaza City in this war. And if you look back in November 2023, February 2024, and other times, the reporting in the Hebrew media is that, the IDF is fighting. They're about to defeat the Zaytun Battalion. Zaytun Battalion is still alive and kicking. They have over 400 fighters, still going. Now, some of them are replacements and they're not as well trained, but the officers there said that they're very good at explosives. They've had a lot of time to prepare the battlefield. And when there's these ceasefires, the work is left half done. That's one of the reasons why IDF has to keep going back, that they might be working on a neighborhood, then they have to pull out during a ceasefire. And then the Hamas can understand where the IDF was operating, understand new tactics that are coming into play because of that, and they can learn the lessons and prepare the ground for the next time. So that's what they're fighting right now. It's important to note that they're working to basically take down all the buildings above ground and destroy all the tunnels underground. There's been a lot of international criticism, but they're very clear. Hamas has turned every building into some sort of fighting position, whether it's explosives, whether you find weapons there, whether there's shafts going into tunnels, whether you find uniforms belonging to Hamas. And therefore, the only way to make sure that terrorists don't come back and use these neighborhoods that are very close to the border is to dismantle them, take them down, and then if anyone tries to come back, we'll be able to see them and to target them. Of course, in the future, once Hamas is gone, then there'll be a much larger rebuilding project, but that's for after the war. But for now, during the war, that neighborhood, like Sajaiya, its neighbor right beforehand, which the 7th Brigade basically dismantled, we expect Zaytun, which still has a lot of buildings standing, to be leveled.
What was their manner? What was their mood like, given the fact that they have been in this for so long?
Whenever you see soldiers in the field, they seem very rested, clean, happy. and determined to carry out the mission. They did say that they have come up with new ways by making sure that soldiers remain fresh. So it's not that these are active duty soldiers, let's not forget. So they're going to,
Not reservists. Right.
right, they're going to work harder than the reservists, but they don't, fight for a few months and then let soldiers go home for a week. They try to have better rotations. So it might be 3 weeks of intensive fighting, and then they'll rotate out one of the battalions to go home to kind of reflect on what lessons they've learned, to refresh themselves, then come back. They're trying to get the soldiers home every couple of weeks to at least be home for a day or two. And of course, there's new soldiers that are coming into the IDF and replacing ones that are discharged. So it seems like they figured out ways, and they understand the importance of keeping the soldiers refreshed and rested as much as possible.
All right, thanks for that, Lazar. Let's take a quick break. When we're back, let's talk about this latest diplomatic, what even to call it, brouhaha or situation that has come about between Netanyahu and Turkey regarding the Armenians. So stay with us for that. Okay, so you covered this a few days ago. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu officially, in a sense, recognized the genocide carried out by the Ottoman Empire against the Armenians and Assyrians and Greeks. That was back in the early 20th century. But then Turkey rejected those remarks. So, obviously this plays out against everything else. And of course, Turkey and Israel's relations, or lack thereof, in the last months. Why don't you take us through it, and maybe starting from the top, really, when the prime minister decided to recognize the Armenian genocide?
So it goes back further than that because, of course, Turkey has been maybe the most vocal critic of Israel since October 7th. So they support Hamas, they host Hamas, they don't consider Hamas a terrorist group, and have done everything to downgrade relations. So diplomatic relations still remain. There hasn't been an ambassador on either side since shortly after October 7th. And they have made a series of moves to curtail trade between the two countries, and a range of other relationships as well. Now, Israel has refrained from recognizing the Armenian genocide, mostly because of the fear that it would affect its relations with Turkey. Turkey, obviously a very important, powerful country, a member with NATO, was in the past a very important trading partner for Israel and a security partner and an important ally of the West. So it was seen as, the logic was, why should we endanger our own interests and our own security to recognize this historical event? Now, there's only 34 countries, if I'm not mistaken, that do recognize it. The other reason Israel is kind of reticent to is that it takes away from the unique nature of the Holocaust. So there's a fear of turning the Holocaust into just another genocide among many. That's another sensitivity there. Of course, Hitler was quoted as saying, when he was talking about his plans ahead of the Holocaust, saying that no one did anything to stop, the slaughter of the Armenians. No one's going to come in and rescue the Jews. I don't remember the exact statement, but something to that effect. So he even was paying attention to that reaction as well. The Armenians have been very disappointed because they say, of all people, the Jews should be sensitive the importance of other people's genocides and the importance of recognizing it. We understand how dangerous Holocaust denial is, and we fight it. It's not only this historical debate, but it justifies violence against Jews today and into the future, Holocaust denial. And of course, we have a prominent Armenian community in the old city of Jerusalem. Now, Netanyahu didn't exactly do this an official declaration, but he said quite clearly, when asked about it, that he recognized, it's on a podcast. He says, well, I just did recognize the Armenian genocide. So here you go, basically offhand. It was not followed up by anything from the Knesset. There wasn't any Knesset vote or anything like that. But the deputy foreign minister said today that it was all coordinated with the foreign ministry. So, it seems to be perhaps part of Israel's way at getting back at Turkey for its aggressive diplomacy against Israel. But of course, these type of things be better if it's not some sort of political or diplomatic football, but we're actually, making our statements on recognition based on the justice and the truth of the matter. So that's the way it stands right now. There's also Azerbaijan, which is another Armenian enemy and close ally of Turkey, which we have to take into consideration because that's a very important strategic ally for us as well. Now, Turkey besides their statement rejecting it, there was a brouhaha on Friday when the Turkish foreign minister, Hakan Fidan, who is no friend of Israel and is a very powerful person within Turkey, gave this speech to parliament, and he was talking about measures that Turkey has taken against Israel throughout the war. And one of the things he said was, we closed Israel's airspace, or closing our airspace to Israeli flights. Now, that was kind of over-reported in Israeli media that there was going to be new measures that Israeli civilian flights could not fly over Turkey. That's not the case. He was referring to something that exists where Israeli military flights and, officials couldn't fly over Turkey.
But commercial?
Yeah, there was no change. And we quoted from Israel and from Arkia that there was no change, and they hadn't received any other instructions. So nothing really changed in that regard. Relations are still terrible. They can't really get that much worse unless ties are totally broken off. But that wasn't the case on Friday, and this doesn't seem to be a direct retaliation for the Armenian statements by Netanyahu.
And then essentially this entire subject is closed for the moment. I mean, do you expect it to sort of keep on carrying on? Because it felt like it came not out of nowhere, of course, given, as you said, the terrible relations between Israel and Turkey over the last months. But it also seemed, yes, because Netanyahu mentioned it on a podcast, it seemed to kind of come out of the ether, so to speak.
Yeah, there was that. And there was also, if you remember last week, there was an IDF operation in Syria where they destroyed some sensitive intelligence equipment. And according to reports, that was Turkish equipment that they destroyed. So Turkey wasn't happy about that as well. There's potential tension in Syria between Turkey and Israel. And there have been talks between the two sides to calm that down and to avoid that getting out of hand. But of course, that remains a flashpoint for further steps by Turkey against Israel.
So it's all related, in other words.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And we shouldn't be surprised because Turkey continues to escalate throughout the war, and will probably look for ways to do so in the future.
Okay. Then I guess we will leave it at that for the moment. Thank you, Lazar, for being on today's Daily Briefing.
Thank you, Jessica.
And thanks to you for listening to the Times of Israel's Daily Briefing. We'll be back again tomorrow with another installment. This episode was produced by the Podwaves. Any comments you have, you can always drop us an email, podcast@timesofisrael.com. Until next time, take care, be well, Shavua Tov.